She will be followed by Shelton Gunaratne, Professor Emeritus of Minnesota State University. Shelton was a journalist and before she became an educator. And so now she is she taught journalism. From journalism she went into educating journalists. So she taught in Australia, China, Malaysia, and now in the United States. He was an inveterate traveler in his younger days, and he devoted an entire volume of his autobiographical trilogy to his travels. He is a theorist, and he has written 2 books on Asian communication theories to dispute the prevailing Western theory, which the 4 theories of the press, which were developed early and which we were teaching our students. So he tried to put a counter theory that communication theory is not Western oriented only, but also Eastern oriented. So he is one of the 2 awardees by AMIC tonight. I think today he will get this award. And his speech will be read by his wife, Yoke, because he has his health does not allow him to speak for a long time, but he will be around to answer questions in case needed. Right. Yoke is there. She will read his prepared speech, which I think is very well done.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to talk about the need to de-Westernize we're based on a very Western style of communication, and I'm going to go through East-West system view of communication. And there is no common agreement. There's no common agreement on the communication theory as a field of study because each tradition uses very different theories and definitions. So we really need to use a defined communication theory acceptable to both the East and the West. And we all know there's always a debate about physics, metaphysics, science and humanities, materialism and spiritualism, yang and yin, that seems to mar the urge of a united or unified communication theory that is acceptable to both East and West. As you can see, the discussion about materialism and spiritualism is the West and the East difference. Before we go further, we need to define 3 things. Communication, what is system and system kind of thinking. Communication is really not just a transmission of information, but rather a coordination of behavior between living organisms. The mind and the body, don't think about just your body, but the mind controls your body too. They are not separate things, but they are interdependent on each other. And that is true, not just for human beings, but for all non-humans too. Imagine about the insects and the bacteria and all those things that is living. The cognitive science really resonates with Buddhist phenomenological view that all living beings are the composite of 5 aggregates. All of us have the 5 aggregates. And I know we're going to repeat a lot of those things. Material body, the sensation, the perception, the disposition, intentional action, and consciousness. All these are interdependent aggregates because all of us have those aggregates, but they're all independent. You can't think, you can't, we smell, we see, we feel, we touch. All those are really in condition the behavior of those things as an individual. So having defined communication as a coordination of behavior between living beings, what is about the next one, which is the system? The system is an integrated whole consisting of functional parts. A human being is the integrated whole of several molecules organ parts, as we can talk about the five aggregates and all the senses that we have. Each part plays a specific role to produce the whole emergence as a network of parts. Our body is made up of a lot of parts, and our whole body and the mind is really a system. And so the system is a network of related functional parts, each of which cannot exist alone. So we talk about communication, we talk about system, so what's system thinking now? System thinking really, communication is a system. It comprises a network of related systems, and also with the functional parts too. And the system thinking is mapping the parts and the wholes and the relationship. So you can think about the system, but it's also the relationship and how you map them. In some ways, Capra and Luisi really define the system thinking very effectively. So you go from perspectives from parts to the whole, to the multidisciplinary, to the shift from objects to relationship, from measuring to mapping, to quantities to qualities, structures to process, objective to organic, epistemic science, and from Cartesian certainty to approximate knowledge. So in short, what they're talking about, communication and the system thinking is very opposite towards what Western people have learned about communication. It's opposite to the Newtonian approach to classical science. A lot of Western kind of communication is based on objectivity and science and how you cannot, the parts are not, it had to be dependent on the whole, they're all interrelated. With the presumptions of objectivity, certainty, mind-body duality, they see the mind and the body as being separate, but it's not true, and the independence of the phenomena. So now, my husband Shelton Gunaratne went to take a very well-known author, Craig, who has come up with a multidisciplinary matrix, because that's his way of explaining how the Western concept of communication comes about. And Craig created what is known as a multidisciplinary matrix called constitutive metal model of communication theory that has the potential of turning into a more unified model paradigm that if it includes Eastern perspective of life and communication. So what we are saying is to go through some of Craig's points of view, and he has some very good points, and he analyzes a lot of traditional ways of defining Western communication, and then we're going to critique and see what is missing. Craig reconstructed communication theory as a dialogical dialectic field rather than a unified theory. You can see it's two, dialogical and dialectical field, not a unified communication, but he is encouraging and stimulating productive argument across the diverse traditions of communication theory, which is very good style. Two principles that he constituted model of communication as a metal model and the theory as a metal discussive practice. And he outlined 7 communication theories, and I won't go through it. Many of those who have gone through Western concepts of communication go through some of the understanding of these 7 concepts, because there are multiple sets of definition, and because of the definition has no common unity, that's how there's a lot of confusion and differences even though with similarities. Let's look at how we critique and improve on Craig's model. He has simplified understanding of the current disorder in the communication disciplines. His method model is not a framework as a guide to communication, but more a meta-discursive reconstruction of prevailing traditions. None of the 7 traditions has a definition of communication in terms of the coordination of behavior between living organisms, and include only limited aspects of communication involving the human beings. So he did influence the 7 traditions to move towards greater cohesion along the lines of modern system thinking now. He appears to be open to East-West convergence of ideas, and he understands there's objectivity and subjectivity, and the mind training. There is linearity and also non-linear, independence versus interdependence, freedom and responsibility. So he understands there are some challenges to work towards that. He showed his bias though, which is omitting the Eastern contributions to several of the 7 traditions. He had not included some of the Asian contributions to that. So, what we come up with is this circular PS. We make it short because it's really a word that is Pantaka Sammupada, is really Buddhist. And the metal paradigm is known as conditioned genesis, or the dependent co-arising phenomenology associated with Buddhism and dynamic kind of mindfulness. And the PS metal paradigm shows the operational dynamics of networks of 12 nidanas. I know we use some of the words, but we can't escape it. But the nidanas in bracket shows you there are systems and factors. Remember, we're talking about not ignoring the East, but because we're trying to merge and integrate the East and the West, and we come up with some terms that they can share. So systems interact as an interdependent whole. And in Buddhism, the samsara is the psychical world and our life world. We can't escape that. So the Buddhist model represents the system view of life, while the Newtonian scientific model represents the mechanistic view. We continue now. We continue now with the condition or the PS metal paradigm clearly demonstrates the structural coupling of both mind-related and body-related variables, which is the dinanas, and which is also the systems of the factors. In contrast to the Cartesian, which is the Western mind-body duality, the Buddhist paradigm clearly establishes the interdependence by emphasizing the embodiment of the mind. I know it's coming back over and over again that the mind and the body are not separate, they're interdependent on each other. And they illustrates the operational dynamics of 3 system networks that subsumes the super system that we call samsara. Now, we're getting into more details because we talk about system, but you know that whether it's a city or whether you have a mayor or a governor, they're all systems and they're all structures that are established to govern some of the things that we do. And so in some ways we're talking about system made up of a lot of networks, and there are subsystems there too. So the next thing is, how are we getting into more an East and West system of view? I saw the 5 minutes now.
5 minutes.
5 minutes now, I speak very fast. The East-West system of view of communication is more holistic meaning of communication, but the Buddhist phenomenology equates communication with the interaction of the 5 aggregates. We talk about all the senses in the body. And the 5 aggregates, I won't go through it again. It's all the, the feelings and the form and all those things that we talk about. I won't worry about the last one. The next one is how those 3 networks, main networks, come about. The subsystem, the first one network is the 5 aggregates. We'll repeat again. And each being is a mere composite of the 5 aggregates, and they expanded to a lot of subsystems, which we call nidanas, or underlying links to that. Then the next one is a second network, which is a network of 3 nidanas that are principal reasons for arising dukkha. I tell you, the Buddhism is all about suffering and satisfactoriness, and though it's because of the ignorance and desire and clinging they talked about, that has got a contact, that has got a role to play. The third one, which is the birth, becoming, birth, senility, and death. This is really the natural process of ourselves, that when we're born and then we go back to dying, and then when we die we re-becoming in another form. So they all relate, they're conditioned by all those subsystems that we work with. So in very summary, the relevance is that the PS metal paradigm explains the relationship among 3 major networks of nidanas, and also the nested networks that are listed with the 5 aggregates. It's a very comprehensive framework that analyzes the process of communications as an ever-changing process that is coterminous with cyclical existence. And again, we go to a more, this is one suitable framework for tradition of communication, and the world is moving towards a paradigm shift to system thinking, where communication scholars have clearly defined the boundaries of the whole of the communication and the constituent parts and the patterns of the network and relationship. I will go quickly because any one of you is interested in a PowerPoint like this one, just let me know and we'll be able to email that to you. But we want to kind of briefly say that the Nidanas and the communication are all co-terminus, and that the Buddhist meta model of dependent encompasses a lot of stuff. You need to know that people think about Buddhism as a religion, but what you need to understand is that it really tells you the system is working, and the system has a lot of interdependence. So, one example we can give you in reality, in life, is really about climate change. Climate change, terrorism, poverty are all interrelated into thinking and behavior of the human beings because of the cravings and attachment, and so it causes a lot of the things that we're talking about. I'm going to close by talking a little bit more about how I'll speed up the process and talk about conditioning, the wheel of becoming, and it rotates the cyclical existence, and which is again the coordination. And to understand what we're talking about, the system thinking and stuff, we have the overview in the links that we talk about in Pierre's paradigm, which is the hallmark of modern theory that West-centric classical science have missed or downplayed. I'm not going to go through this because it relates back to our Four Noble Truths. And Buddhism does not support Western theories built on dependent and independent variables because it asserts the interdependence of everything in the world. So we do not believe that anything can be independent. So again, this is the Five Aggregates and how it goes into it. And the dynamics of dependent co-arising comes up. Again, it repeats itself. It's a circular paradigm with no beginning and end, which is cyclical kind of existence. And this is very standard explanation for everything. But the wheel of becoming is like the wheel of life, wheel of becoming, and it talks about, again, how it's logical, and when you apply that, it will be part of the modern system theory, which makes sense. So, towards the end, we have to say, science must acknowledge that nothing is permanent, change is always present, and there is much interdependence upon the variables to make this wheel work on a personal level, as well as for the globe and everything that goes. Thanks for listening.